Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? We got some work to do now. Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? We need some help from you now. Come on, Scooby-Doo, I see you, pretending you got a sliver. You're not fooling me, 'cause I can see the way you shake and shiver. You know we got a mystery to solve, so Scooby-Doo, be ready for your act. Don't hold back, and Scooby-Doo, if you come through, you're gonna have yourself a Scooby snack. Scooby-Dooby-Doo, here are you. You're ready and you're willing. If we can count on you, Scooby-Doo, I know we'll catch that villain.
Okay, and once again, the camera is out of my... And I think, actually, hold on, first things first. Get this straightened out here. Hold on. That's a little better. Okay. And I believe the microphone is also not quite right. Yeah, it's not right. Hold on. No, that's not it. Okay. That might be it. Also, might help to bring that up some. Testing 1, 2, 10. Okay, I think that's right. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's put it right in that. Let's not overcrank it. Okay. Okay, let's see. All right, now let me poke over at the YouTube side of things and see how it's coming through. And test you until we get past the ad. Okay, come on, get them. No, come on, get past the ad. Okay. All right, come on. Oh, for crying out loud. Okay. All right, test, 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 test. In a world where like them. Okay, the mic's working. All right. You know, weird going through this right now. All right, so I'm gonna get out of that. So, all right, guys, I noticed the playback. I was had to download Friday's stream to get the last bit at the end. I wanted to say because the rest of it was going. That's just there was a mishap with the screensaver. The appeal didn't work. So, but it sounded like I was the end of a tunnel. This thing wasn't going through the camera there. But let's go ahead and things tend to reset all the damn time. Get them set, and then time goes by, and it's like, nope, we're gonna put you back in the bottom of a coffee can, guy. All right, so let's go ahead and do that, and a couple checks here, things going on. Okay, let's get back on there. And the messages. Settings. Let's put that on here. What are you getting sent? Come on. There we go. So we might get somebody popping in. Who knows? In the meantime, okay, do I want to stick with this? I mean, I kind of hinted with it with the description, so this is the way. So, yeah, let's give Batman a rest. I mean, the Batmobile is fun, but where's my Mandalorian? There we are. Okay. There we go. Now, let's see, while we're in there, let's look a quick run through the shop. See if there's anything new. For Scooby and Shaggy. The Mystery Machine. Okay, 2000. Let's see. Let's. Come on. Let me look at them. There we go. I will say they did. You know, the originally I don't think it had windows on the sides like that. But you know, it's replacing an SUV on this here, so you got them. And it's got a couple of different decals. So that's one's kind of a spooky haunted house. The other one is sponsored by Scooby Snacks. And then, of course, the wheels. Yeah, this should still be here by the time I get paid. So and then we got the usual thing. This. I'm going to say this reminds me of some of the witch outfits that Indy has done over the years, but should have done one in a long time. But you know, can you keep anyway. Again, this is a misread of the song "Zombie." Okay, it's not about zombies. Although, actually, the song and the impact it made is, given some credit with finally ending the Troubles. Kind of putting a sort of sharp focus. Yeah, Catholic. It's kids are being killed by this. Enough already. No. Still at it. Nightmare Before Christmas. I think. No, Jack was not a battle pass. He wasn't having it. Because I've been consistently doing battle passes, since Chapter 2, Season 4. Would have been Chapter 2, Season 3, but I was so late getting in there, wasn't any point to it. Alright. Behemoth. Then we got the Lego thing, then the cruise and the passes. Alright. Let's go ahead and get back up here. Now, quest-wise, nothing earth-shattering here. It's like, we do some damage with the pumpkin launcher. Got stuff with the chainsaw. At this point, it's pretty much just grind. See what happens. Got some clutter truckers out here today, and got quite a bit done. Also kicked my ass, so I ain't doing shit tomorrow, that's for damn sure. I'll be lucky if I can make it through this stream right now. My back is so messed up. Because I can't just sit back and watch, let her do all thing by myself. I got to get in there just to not feel like a total layabout. I took 3 loads of trash. I was taking my 3rd load of trash out when she came out, so I was already pretty much wiped. We did clear out a lot of junk. Upset a lot of bugs. I did finally figure out where I'm going to put the stereo in the living room. To require minimum minutes to. I got to move one little shelf with some stuff and put the side in there and figure out where to put the speakers. But like, that seems to be the least invasive thing. The stuff on there, like phones, they're not phones, they're not even plugged in, so screw it. Take them down, put them somewhere else, slide that stereo in there. There we go. And maybe sometime this month I can actually play some tunes. Or even cooler, hook up the TV and the Blu-ray player to the stereo, and actually play some stereo sound with the movies. So I'm not stuck with just a little speaker on the TV. This is part of the whole process of really getting housebroken all over again, getting used to the fact, okay, you are settled here. You can set things up. You can put the stereo up and put things up there. You're not going to have to tear it down in 2 minutes and run for the hills. Yeah. I mean, it's probably in the neighborhood of PTSD, but it's like 5 years in a row. It's like the kind of thing of just. Again, we've not had a calm, measured move from one place to another since 2001. When I moved out of my folks' house to our first apartment. That was the closest thing to an organized move. Everything it's always been in panic. Get out of here before they boot you. You got 2 days to get moving. It's all been crazy. So it's one heap to another. And probably not very helpful collecting stuff as we go along. So pretty soon it's okay, now you got to deal with this shit. Well, at one point I want to set up the green screen. Now that I finally got a projector screen over there and got to find where the green screen I got. I'm going to click it up and test that out. Make it look like a real professional channel. Notice that really does help a lot. Doing the green screen with the fancy background. People don't want to see the reality. And I think I'm going to be already on that. Oh, yep. Just in time to find out. Yep, you placed number 88. Surprised you lasted that long. Ironically killed by the cute witch. After the comments, if Indy's watching, I'm sure she'd get a howl out of that one. Actually, after all the putzing around, I gotta go to the bathroom here, so hold on. We're gonna throw a video up a little early. So let me go ahead and pull that. And I'm gonna give myself a little time this time, so. All right. Let's see. I'm gonna use this one. We'll go with that one. Back in a bit. Okay, something I need to really get back into here. When last we left off, we had just gotten up to through the movies, but that overlaps with a little something here because the movies are going great, and so 1986 goes around. The 20th anniversary of the show is coming up, and one consistent thing, all the writers are going into Paramount. Where when are you doing another Star Trek TV show? Even back then, it was not. No, this is a TV property. It works property on TV. Movies are fine. We want a TV show. And again, this because Phase 2 fizzled out. There's other stuff. And so finally, they figured, okay, enough time's gone by. That's right. We're going to do a new Star Trek TV show. But we do need to get Gene Roddenberry's blessing on this. They knew that much. Even though it's like having him on as executive consultant, even though they barely listened to him, they did have to give the movies a sense of legitimacy. They had to have his name in there somewhere, even if he was actively sabotaging them at times. He leaked scripts because he didn't like he didn't like that he had killed Spock. He leaked the script out. That sort of thing. So, the scripts are all numbered. So who number had that number script? That was Roddenberry. Yeah. But they knew they needed him on board in some capacity. So they're telling, okay, this is what we have in mind for a new Star Trek show. And the idea they had in mind was, new Enterprise, for they go, sell new toys, but also they're going to have cadets running the thing, going out there, getting in trouble, causing misadventures. And Roddenberry has always been opposed to that sort of thing because he was in the military. He didn't go to the academy, but he went to an OCS program, and he knows your cadets are at the academy. They're learning to become officers. You don't send cadets out. You send experienced officers to do this type of thing. But that's why he's always rejected the idea of a Starfleet Academy show, because this is what they'll do. They'll do Animal House in space. And he kind of came back with their ideas about, well, no, God, no, please. I could do better than that right now. And he was retired pretty much at that point. He had settled into doing conventions and trying to his hand at writing other stuff. Because he said in an interview with Starlight, he didn't want Star Trek written on his tombstone. Okay. But as a major point, they kept at it. Okay, well, fine, it's my baby. I'm stuck with this. I might as well do something with it. But he had the mistake of saying, I could do better than you now. Better than that right now. And I said, would you? I was like, oops. He let his mouth, write a check that his ass had to catch. So, okay, fine. You got me. And he didn't want to do it again. Because, again, some of the after the interview, he lost his family because of the first one. It was, he couldn't control himself. He got dallying in with Majel and Nichelle and God knows who else. Even going back to the lieutenant, he was fooling around with Michelle, with Majel. But by the end of the show, his marriage with Eileen had been gone. And Majel already talking marriage at that point. By the time the third season rolled around, and it's I'm not going through that again. But it's like, but okay, what we're gonna do first run syndication. There won't be a network telling you what to do. You will be in charge. You will do it the way you want. Again, you're a big boy. You've been around long enough. We're going to trust you not to, put go-go dances on the bridge. But, that sort of thing. But, okay, fine. And again, first-run syndication was not a new thing. It had mainly been done with, like, game shows on primetime slots. Afternoon, when the network's doing their thing. Nighttime version of Match Game PM, they call it. They had the nighttime version of Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy. That's everything. That's what I started. Those were daytime game shows originally. They didn't start prime. They were during the day. While other teams were running soap opera, then somebody was running game shows. But there had been some first-run syndication dramas. Some, not many. And they generally went to like independent stations like Gentle Ben and stuff like that, Although even then, it's like very little first run drama. Mostly it was just sitcoms and talk shows. But they're okay. No, we're feeling a little better, because Star Trek's done in syndication where the stations can put it where they want it. They can target their audience and we'll go that route. And with that, okay, Roddenberry came back and he started putting together as much of the old band as he could. And again, a lot of it, let's clear the deck a little bit. He had to rely on a lot of people. But also by this point, the myth of the great bird of the galaxy had taken full form by this point. So he was claiming a lot of credit that really wasn't due him. Now, whether this was just shorthand, saying we did this and this, because he did have to sign off on everything, but he didn't come up with a lot of it. A lot of it was, by Gene Coon and Matt Jeffries and others. But it's like, now you're having to deal with this because you tell the story enough times, you start to believe it. You kind of forget the details yourself. So he came in and he's kind of buying the myth himself that he's created of being the great bird of the galaxy and the creator of all things Star Trek. So we're bringing back Bob Justman and Dorothy Fontaine and David Gerrold and Eddie Milkus was in there for a while. And this is not quite the same guy they dealt with 20 years earlier. And also his own health was starting to fade. Because by this point he was starting to develop a little something called water, hydroencephalus, water on the brain. Where basically you get fluid buildup inside the brain, and it's like, it does tend to affect things. He'd have good days, and other days it's like a little off there. Also, complicating the matter is, his lawyer, Leonard Mazos, he'd been around back in the original series days. He wasn't that much of a presence. Now he inserted himself right in there. He was there during casting meetings and other things, and he had no business being there. He would write notes on scripts, claiming it was from Roddenberry. Difference is, it's going through Dorothy Fontana. She used to be a secretary. She knows damn well Gene's handwriting. Knew it wasn't him. And he was offering story notes and eventually landed him in a arbitration grievance with the Writers Guild and had him banned from the lot. I got that point. It was like in the documentary Chaos on the Bridge. Shatner's been really documentary. Talking to David Gerrold. And one point, so Mazes, and they're on like third floor of the building. And there's Mazes, and up against the window at the end of the hallway. And remember, one of the things writers do to kind of amuse themselves and keep them going totally nuts is imagine ways of killing their enemies in ways that they can get away with. They're imagining these things. They're using the story and stuff. Like Harlan Ellison, we used to name villains in his stories over the guys who picked on him as a kid. So he's seeing Mazeless at the end of the hallway, and just the window there, and knowing there's nothing between them and the ground but like maybe a hedgerow, and like I could charge and throw them out there, and they'd give me a medal because everyone hated him by this point. But yeah, that's the kind of thing. Well, not a good environment because they're going thing, and you're going. But he's nailing that. Okay, you want to do this thing right. You got to, one, separate. You put about, so about 78 years since Kirk and Spring all wrapped up. That gives the movies some time to wrap up whatever they're doing because they're by 80, 85, 86. We're talking Star Trek 3, 4, not Star Trek 4. So but then by this point the cast they knew the original cast is too expensive and too old. Insurance isn't going to cover them. They're not going to pay that much just for the cast. So there's got to be a new show regardless, or a new cast. So that and Roddenberry wasn't much for no. It's not. Let's go forward. Let's keep going forward. So this whole thing, what Star Trek is about, going forward, going out and seeing what's going on. So set it not quite 100 years, but close enough. About 78 years after whenever Kirk and Spock are finished up. So we're talking 24th century. Technology is like it's well beyond the 23rd century, but not so nuts. And his idea with the design of the Enterprise D, he called it technology unchained. Where it's like it doesn't just have to be just form function. Like we can make the ship look like a piece of sculpture, and that's where you get the big swooping things and the big So. And again, a lot of this, I don't know how much of that, but again, in writing the Bible, the show's Bible, the writer's guide, David Gerrold did a lot of that. Now, granted, a lot of things were also cut and pasted from the original Bible. Some things are consistent, but the character descriptions. Jean-Luc Picard, I think, started as Julien Picard. I think maybe because the name Jean-Luc Picard, that was actually one of Cousteau's associates, was named Jean-Luc Picard. I think there was 2 seasons of the name. But either way, it was based on, the name was pulled from somewhere. Riker, that went through a few, mainly changing its spelling, whether to spell it with a Y or an I. And again, a lot reusing previous concepts, the whole Riker, Deanna dynamic that was lifted from Decker and Ilea. And of course, they had to, with regards to Deanna, they had to bat back a few ideas. He wanted to have 3 boobs, 3 or 4 boobs. And Dorothy Fontana was like, well, how are you going to line them up, Gene? All in a row, stack. When you make it clear that this is stupid, he backed off rather quickly. That's the thing. Roddenberry he would do a lot of stuff, just kind of like thinking out loud. What if we do this? Then how serious it was at that point, who knows? Let's see. Tasha Yar started off as Maja Hernandez, a deliberate ripoff of Vasquez from Aliens. When you saw that, yeah, I'd like that kind. She's the one I got to have fun with. That's good. And that's why originally the casting was Denise Crosby was going to play Deanna, and Marina Sirtis is bringing to play Hernandez. But they would like him, but not necessarily in those roles. And in typical case of Roddenberry, let's shuffle things. Let's okay, let's make Sirtis the counselor, and Crosby can be the security chief. We'll change the name, something make a Russian name, Tasha Yar. That's a good name, and the answer, make from Planet Beta. What? The Betazoid. That doesn't sound like Bug-Eyed Monster. No. And let's see, Geordie LaForge. That was a little honor to a real life fan, Georges LaForge, the kid in an iron lung. Hardcore fanboy though, and Star Trek kind of kept him going for him. I think his story is written up, I think, in Star Trek Lives. About they would set up a TV so he could watch it in the mirror over his head. And let's see, but they didn't have a chief. They didn't feel the need for a chief engineer to be a main character. He'd show up, to it. And let's see, Wesley that was a self-insert for Roddenberry as a kid. I think to try and mask it a bit. Originally, it was Leslie, a girl. But I think they figured that's a little creepy, Gene. You know, well, back and forth. And Wesley, that was Gene Roddenberry's middle name, was Eugene Wesley Roddenberry. So that's in there. Bob Justman had to argue for the inclusion of Worf as a regular character. Because one of the things Roddenberry went is no direct connection to the original series. We're going to try and stamp this up and make it stand on its own. So no relying on bringing up old, like no Vulcans, no Romulan, you know. And he did not want a Klingon in there. But again, Justman kind of fought for that. No. This is the statement you're making is we're now friends. Like, back, in Errand of Mercy. It's like, one day the, Earth and the Klingons will be fast friends. Never. It's like, well, this is the fulfillment of that. And on that one, okay, fine, you can have your Klingon. And then of course we bring in Worf. The casting of that was thing because Michael Dorn was a fan. He had his own idea of what a Klingon, So he went in. He was very gruff, very and guys he knew were there, and they were, hey, how's it going? Like, just sort of growled at him to get into the character. So he went in, so he blew him away on that one. And let's see, Data. Originally, the writer's guide said it was going to be pronounced Data. But I think that was one of those cases of, especially once you got Patrick Stewart in there. No, Data. So, okay, fine. It sounds more like a name anyway than Data. And they actually made a poke on that in when Dr. Pulaski, Data. No, my name is Data. What was the difference? One is my name, one is not. And, of course, Beverly Crusher. Well, it's like, got a female doctor in there, and I think it's kind of pulling on more of the, again, putting, a female, it's a more of a nurturing character, somewhat a little more appealing than a gruff old country doctor like McCoy. And I think that pretty much covers, the main cast there and the cast of characters. And again, when trying to cast the captain, they talked. William Campbell was up for at one point. A few guys they were looking for because Roddenberry had in mind. He had more of a hairy Frenchman in mind. What he did not have in his mind was a bald Englishman. But that was another Bob Justman one where because Justman saw him at a lecture talking about Shakespeare or something or Dickens, and was just taken away by the voice. Said that yes, this would be a good guy. And the case of, he's actually, Patrick Stewart was 45 when he was cast, whereas Picard was 55. He was in the mid-50s. So he was playing about 10 years younger. But, the bald head sold it that he was that age. And that little thing, because, it took quite a selling point, and they brought him in, and Stewart wasn't a fan. He maybe aware of it because it was in pop culture, but again, Britain, Star Trek's not that big a presence. He signed on finally. It was like, you realize you kind of, signed on to an American folklore. But the whole thing about whether, should he wear a hairpiece or not, and they sent back to London for his personal hairpiece. And it showed up, and it wasn't in great shape. Kind of a rat's nest type of thing. Came in with it on. It's like, okay, lose it. We'll go bald. It's imposing enough, and it'll easier to sell that he's older. But again, Roddenberry being the good, think on his feet solution to a production issue or a question. Because one report said, wouldn't they have cured baldness by the 24th century? Roddenberry's answer was perfect. By the 24th century, nobody will care. And that sums it up. Okay, perfect. I think Roddenberry's big skill really was in producing and in solving these kind of problems that come up in such a way that works. And he was, as a writer, he won a Writers Guild Award for one of his Have Gun to Travel scripts. But he was kind of hit or miss. A large part with like Justman says, like you could tell how far down in the bourbon bottle he'd gotten by how weird the script was getting. First act, teaser and first act, brilliant, best thing you ever saw in your life. Act 2, Act 3, it's like, okay, still there, but by the time Act 4, it's like, what the fuck am I reading here? I think you could probably sum up the Omega Glory as a good example of that. You got a perfect little mystery here. What has happened to this ship? My God, we got his crystallized thing, and you get down and this thing about the Captain Tracy standing up against all these people and trying to stand, and by the end it's like, what? He's reading the Constitution. What the hell happened here? It's just that sort of thing. That's what they wouldn't go to press with that. It's like, you got to fix this fourth act. Shore it back up and get something workable. But again, the production, the Chaos on the Bridge is a great resource for watch what the hell happened on this show behind the scenes. It wasn't all fun and games. The cast, they're still getting along great. They're all best friends. They meet together, get together for dinners. Kind of, soldiers in arms type of thing, because they were, the conditions they were in, like their little I suspect the trailers they were put in as their dressing rooms were probably the same ones they used back in the original series. Little rinky-dink, ratted out, trailers out back. They were not the greatest condition. And again, they probably would date back, probably even before the original series. As soon as they could get them, we don't have to build digressions, just line them up back there and we're done. But also, one of the things that recurred is of course, the cast had all been, they've been around TV, and they knew that you're doing a long hard shoot. You gotta pick your chances to goof off once in a while. Yep. Now Patrick Stewart coming in, the Royal Shakespeare Company, very dedicated, very serious. Anyway, we are here to work, not play around. And it's like, and they continue to say, Patrick, lighten up, okay? It's we're not playing for the Queen, okay? A large part of that was just Patrick Stewart was scared to death he was going to get fired and sent back to England any moment because he was going to make sure that it worked. Eventually he got into the hang of it, and he got just as goofy as everybody else. Like, if you've ever seen the video of, it was a screwy little thing, Patrick Stewart singing a kind of a birthday song to Roddenberry, dancing and prancing around, and concludes with a straw hat and cane, and it just sort of plopped back in the thing, hat on the thing, engage, and they take that, fling it. It's on YouTube, find it, I should track it down. It's a sort of the stage, Patrick Stewart, the Royal Shakespeare, and just goofing around like a weird, when they're filming, I'm jumping ahead here. All good things, or just even just generally, when things are getting like John or Frank said, again, you've got daffier and daffier thing. It's like someone reporting, shields down 10%. Oh my God, we're going to die, and leap into Jonathan Frakes' arms. It's like during filming All Good Things, it's like one, he just leaps up over the big wooden horseshoe in the back of the bridge and is wrestling around on the ground with Michael Dorn. It's like it got crazy. Now, as for why there's only one blooper reel that's gotten out really of the Next Generation, because they try to continue the tradition. Berman really didn't go for that. They got one out, but that was it. And it's like, all right. Wasn't quite the same. But I think a lot of say, no, we're not doing any more of these here. Okay? And if we do, it's staying strictly internal and not going out. Because one of them, it's like it included, as they're introducing the cast and the blooper, one of them is one of, shots from a movie with Marina Sirtis where she's topless. It's like, gee, this goes out, when these things go out, they go out in front of kids too, right? And knock it off. We're not doing it anymore. But, okay, Next Gen comes out and is running. And it's pulling in this, just as good as numbers as the original series. Because most of it, the stations were already carrying the original series and whatever, saying, got first dibs. And that's okay. We've got new structure, but the deal is for a full year. Like you got it. There's no bailing out after 13 weeks. But it got it, and it took off, and it was the number one show in first run in syndication drama for years. And when it took off, and that's when you start seeing everyone else want to jump on the bandwagon, though. That's when you get Babylon 5 and all these other shows that came out, did a reboot of a restart of Kung Fu, for God's sake, with David Carradine. And God, I don't know how many different shows cropped up on it. Xena, Hercules, all these things. That's because Star Trek Next Generation was a big whammo hit. Like, okay, there's a market here. Well, thing in Hollywood, no one wants to be first, but everyone wants to be second. And so we go on, and Next Gen is doing great. All right, and then say, we want a spinoff. We want to do a spinoff. And so, well, also, let's go on. By first season, and Roddenberry is showing he's not necessarily quite on his game. And he knew he wasn't. That's why he brought in Rick Berman. He knew he wasn't going to be able to keep this up. He's starting to, he's not all there. He's not as sharp as he put up a good act, but he's not going to hold up. And so he knew he was going to have to find somebody to pick up the reins if he stumbled. And the whole thing of, okay, Rick Berman was put there by the studio to ride herd on Roddenberry. But Roddenberry said he's going to turn the tables on him. I'm going to turn him to my side. And he took him under his wing, and he made him study. Okay, this is how it works. This is it, and kind of mentioned it's like this thing falls apart. You got to keep it going. Don't let these idiots. You know what they're like. You were one of them up to 10 minutes ago. Don't let them do what they want to do to this show. The whole reason I came back in the first place because they were going to do this crap. And so, and to an extent, Berman held to that throughout the time of his. A little too hard sometimes. There's a point or two where he could have lightened up the reins a little bit, but he kept it. No, this is not. He said, "This is not my vision. This is Roddenberry's vision. We're going to stay true to that." But by the first season, he knew it wasn't working out too well for him. And second season, they brought in Maurice Hurley, who didn't quite buy all of it in the first, but he had a big resume, Miami Vice and all that stuff. But his idea, Roddenberry's idea, was just all wackadoo. That was his term, wackadoo. And he recently tried to bring stuff up, and apparently he's credited with introducing the Borg. And no, I don't think he ripped it off from Doctor Who. I don't think Maurice Hurley knew what Doctor Who, ever heard of Doctor Who. So it's not that hard an idea to come up with, with the implants and cyber, prosthetics and whatever. It's not that hard to get what happens if it goes too far. Yeah. And apparently got rid of Gates McFadden early on because she was a little too mouthy. She wanted more for Crusher, and Hurley didn't, so get rid of her. They brought in Diana Muldaur, who had the second Genesis 2 then Planet Earth. She got to run at that, and I think she'd also been in a couple of Star Trek episodes. I think she may have been in Lieutenant once or twice. But she perfectly wanted to work again. How much they respected Roddenberry, wanted to work with him, depended on how much they worked with him in the first place. Because once in a while, they'll throw in a good part. Yeah, he was great. It's like, if you were there with him every day, it's like, this guy was an asshole. But yeah, she did her year, came back, and after Hurley flamed out, and he left with no hesitation, like, I'm out of here. This place is nuts. Roddenberry railed out, you don't know the difference between a deflector, screen, and a tractor. It's like, what the hell? But by season 3, brought in Michael Piller, who was Next Gen's answer to Gene Coon. He knew how to, Roddenberry, said these are the rules. So our job is to work within those rules. You didn't want the characters fighting for being judged. It's like, we'll just do it. Okay, I can buy these guys are professionals. They should know how to work. And at that point, it's like the stories became less plot, or there was still major plots going on, but the focus became more on just the characters, how they dealt with things, and you started getting stuff. And again, Pillar was the the writing producer. He was the guy who get with the writers and write scripts of his own. Berman was the line producer. He would make sure everything was on thing. And finally, by season 3, Roddenberry is like, okay, I can finally kick back and relax. I got people that are running the show. They're still running stuff by him. He's still in the loop, but he's no longer having to intervene so much. He's got people who can do it for him. He can finally relax a bit. And again, also in the season 3, that's when the dialogue started to be a little smoother, a little less, hackneyed. And started playing just a little, better. And we started getting the really good stuff, And whoops. But again, you started seeing him less, because his health is also deteriorating pretty badly by this point. And again, you'd have good days, you'd have bad days. The bad days come more frequent than the good days. And eventually, and again, also during this whole time, Susan Sackett is carrying on the affair. She'd been kind of the other woman since the 70s. Majel knew all about it, but knew she couldn't do anything about it. And she really didn't have much to gripe, because once upon a time, she was the other woman. So it's like fighting him on, and again, not like she hadn't carried on. She carried on herself once in a while. She stepped on him a few times. So. But when the day came, though, where Gene finally passed on to that undiscovered country from which no traveler returned, Majel made sure that Susan was out the door within 10 minutes of the news breaking. Also, Richard Arnold was out. That was more Rick Berman's idea. Richard Arnold had been... he'd been kind of Gene's little lackey for a number of years. We even go back, because I think he may have even been the guy who, at one of the charge conventions, when Gene and Majel were trying to get into a place where they're holding the discussion, and he didn't recognize. Only people connected with Star Trek can get through here. And Gene goes, "I am Star Trek," and brushes by in a big grand fashion. Everyone laughs. You know who that was? That was Gene Roddenberry. Oh, but Richard Arnold kind of managed to ingratiate himself, and became pretty much his running boy, and eventually got into the position as the head archivist was the word with the Next Gen. And I corresponded many times with him. I still have the letters. But he was a bit of a pain in the butt with certain things. The authors and comic book writers were serious problem with Richard Arnold, the way he would. And he's really the main source of this thing of the animated series is out because Gene didn't like it. He changed his mind after a while, which is something Gene never told Bejo Trimble or Dorothy Fontana. And Bejo's saying because, he had a copy of the Concordance on his desk during Next Gen, and animated series takes up a big chunk of that, and he never sold it. If you update this thing anytime soon, don't include the animated. I don't like it anymore. No, he never said that to them. So, again, this brings a pretty well-founded speculation, and I've talked to David Jones, and yeah, that sounds about right. Basically, animated series was excluded from any kind of references in Next Generation for legal reasons, because it's kind of what they're facing right now with Secret Hideout and the current stuff. Filmation actually did the production of the animated series. Paramount Television just distributed it. So, the way the rules are certainly back then, if they made any reference to anything that was exclusively the animated series, Filmation would have to get a cut. They'd have to run it by them, and they'd have to pay them to use it. And Paramount has never been in the habit of paying money they don't want to have to pay, especially not since Gulf Western took over. It's like, no, because that was part of the thing of gutting the budget with Star Trek's third season, because they didn't see any point in doing it. They already got the syndication deal. They don't want to spend any more money. They do now. They cheaped the show out and it worked, and it showed. But for legal reasons, the animated series was set aside. Only those stuff that was also from that can trace back to the original stuff, like Captain April being first Captain of the Enterprise. That was from the format. That's where it got pulled from, so that was the real game. Spock's troubled childhood on Vulcan, that was referenced in Journey to Babel. That was good. Spock going back in time to save his younger self, that wasn't. Going to the negative universe and aging backwards, that wasn't. That was out. That stuff like that. You couldn't mention Edoans or Cations or stuff like that. Anything that was exclusively of the animated series was off limits. And Roddenberry had a way. It's like he would tell people what he felt they needed to know, and end the conversation. Really kind of conflict averse. He didn't like getting into fights. So instead of going to big details, that there is a section of Star Trek that Roddenberry had no control over, or Paramount didn't have a complete claim over, which is I don't want anymore. No, it doesn't count. And from there, no, he doesn't want anymore. It doesn't count. It's but hey, wait a minute. Those were 4th-season scripts for the most part. There's nothing wrong with that, though. So, but until, and again, we're going into where it starts over into Deep Space Nine. They wanted a spinoff. I'll get that. I'll do the spinoff here first, because again, Roddenberry was still around when they started developing DS9, and he was in on the talks on that. He got his 2 cents worth in. I think a lot of it, with the Bajorans and the religion. Again, Roddenberry was not a big braving atheist. He had his own ideas. He thought organized religion was dropping the ball a lot. This is a bunch of Bronze Age nonsense here, but it's like, but there's something out there that this is what these guys set up is what it, and they think what it's about. Yeah, I know. Goodness, it was not quite so there. This is what these people understood to be, but it's not necessarily the truth. Okay, so there's something going on there we don't understand yet. They didn't understand it then. Why should we understand it now? But there's something going on. There's something beyond what we know. And so I think a lot of that was incorporated into the Bajorans and their belief in the prophets, and these are extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional beings, the yada yada yada. So the whole thing, Roddenberry wouldn't have approved it. Roddenberry was in on the development of DS9, so screw you. But also around the time, that is when the legal wrangling was finally being wrapped up over the rights to the animated series. And a big thing on that one is, again, I point to the fact that when it came out on home video, it was through CBS Home Video, not under Filmation's title. Filmation was also putting out DVD sets, but it's under Filmation. You can get season sets of the shows they were doing, but Star Trek, that's CBS Home Video. That is Paramount. The only time you see the Filmation logo at all, nowhere else on there. And that is also when you start seeing references to the animated series. Kor talking about his old ship, the Klothos. That's from Time Trap. And Garak talking about tending to Edosian orchids, as posing as a gardener on Romulus. Edoans, that's what Lieutenant Eric's was. The three on three leg camp. That's from the animated series. So you start seeing references of the animated series throughout, and that's when now it's clear. That's when the animated series became canon again, and was now free to, and you still read that and references in Enterprise later on. And we got an issue here. Okay, we're going to do that in a minute. But that is when... Got anyone still saying, that's not canon? No, it's canon, okay? It was off the shelf for a while for legal reasons, but it's back in by the time DS9 starts referencing it. let's end that debate right now. But okay, so and again, you can at the time the first reference there, that's when it's okay. Now we know it's certainly by this point. Anyway, when the thing came out, and there's a debate on the DVD set, and the extras, is animated series canon, and they go through it all. And David Joe Rapp, look, it aired on NBC. Roddenberry was the showrunner. Dorothy Fontana, approved the script. Most of the writers were original series, writers. You had almost the entire original cast in their original parts. It's canon. Okay? It's like, what is the debate here? And like I said, I ran this by David Gerald, what I had heard about this being off limits for legal. And he said, yeah, that sounds about right. So that's about as close to firsthand as we're going to get here. But yeah. So Next Gen is going strong here, and they bring in this, second series, and they want to go something different. And again, Roddenberry was in on it. But like Berman puts, like, if Star Trek was wagon train to the stars, knowing full well we're talking a reference to the TV show Wagon Train, then and DS9 is the rifleman in space. Okay, we're gonna hold it there. You want to see the rest of that? It is on my channel. I'm pretty sure I got a separate playlist just for a history of Star Trek. You want to play that? That's about halfway through, but I don't want to spend the entire show doing that because we're already almost at an hour runtime. So let's get back to what we're supposed to be doing here, namely watching me futilely attempt to play Fortnite. Let's get that back up here. Hopefully now that's been sitting for a while. It's ready to actually do stuff. All right. I'll tell you, the series of it, I'm doing one, the inspiration is really, Simon Schama's A History of Britain, where it's kind of told in the form of, like, various anecdotes. It starts on the Skara Brae, ancient prehistoric settlement on the north end of Scotland, and just telling a story about that, and then just different stories throughout history, and by giving an idea of what how Britain grew through. Last was talking about, the two, George Orwell and Winston Churchill. George Orwell's real name was Winston something or other. And you got two aspects of Churchill, the aristocrat, and then Orwell, the working class guy, and how they each have their perspectives on Britain. But I wanted to bring that, to Star Trek. It's like, no, let's bring this down to earth here, so to speak. And also a bit of reaction to a triangle and something or other. Interesting info and everything, but it's a bit pedantic, and I'm not dealing with them very much of a, kind of up his own ass a bit, because I challenged him on the whole thing about Gene Coon was fired because it was too joking. No, Gene Coon was not fired, and no one had a problem with the humor level on the show. The most they had was a bit of a dispute over the approach on the episode Bread and Circuses. But that was it. And that was mainly probably because of the overt religiousness of it. But other than that, no. But Gene Roddenberry loved Gene Coon. One, he was taking a lot of the workload off it, but it was also driving everybody nuts, including Gene Kuhn, because he was burnt. Everyone was burned out, but Gene Kuhn is also on the verge of a nervous breakdown because of a lot of stuff going on in his personal life, and that had to do with problems with his marriage. He hooked up with a girlfriend, the one that got away, but now he got a chance to go. Divorced his wife, got hooked up with her again. His first wife dying of cancer almost immediately. That just threw him for a loop and felt personally responsible for it's just nuts. And also Gene Kuhn was a chain smoker. So and the way that Warren Zevon put it, it may have been a tactical error not to go see a doctor for about 20 years. By the time that he finally was feeling ill enough to see the doctor, it was probably up to at least stage 3 lung cancer by that point, possibly stage 4. Because they just thought the smog was bugging him. No, that's not it, Gene. No, Gene Kuhn just needed a break from the craziness on all sides. And his secretary, Andy Richardson, she went with him when he went to about halfway, or the latter part of the second season. When he bolted and went over to Universal, she went with him. So as far as you want a first-hand account of what happened, that's the closest you're going to get. She was there at the time. She knows exactly what was going on. Come on, pick up the... All right, gotta move here. Come on. You weasel Dixon. I got time for this. God. This is the kind of thing that gets you running off the side of a cliff without knowing it. Okay. Let's just get out of here. This thing is glitching too much. I didn't even think about engaging anybody in combat. But he still, them. Oh, the very first time. If you talk to David Gerald, I have. Okay, nobody was fired over things. In fact, after Gene Kuhn left, I keep saying the full name because otherwise the algorithm flags the last name. You're saying the racial? No, I'm saying the guy's name. But all right, let me get back in here and shield up. Roddenberry wrote, a very scathing, basically riot act to the entire cast, but especially to the three main principals, Bill Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, and Dee Kelly. Excoriating them for screwing things up so damn much that we blamed him personally, these guys personally, for the craziness He kind of had the other Gene leave. Because they said, one of the reasons we lost him is because of you, the shenanigans you guys were pulling. And people can't, like to blame Shatner for all this stuff, but thinking Nimoy also was pulling shit, and D. Kelly to an extent was pulling his share of crap too. All right. So we kind of made it, kind of read the right. Look, am I the executive producer of the show or not? I am. You're going to start minding your P's and Q's, or we're going to have, a new captain. We're going to recast everybody. Fuck all of y'all. None of you are the executive producer of the show. I am. Kind of thing of if you've been in the military, and I suppose also doing it's time in the Army Air Corps and as a cop, it's like you've had your fair share of having your ass chewed by the folks in charge, with the result being you know how to dish it as well as anybody else. So I'm sure there was a certain amount of Gene channeling his drill instructors from the police academy and from boot camp. And again, most of the, a good chunk of the cast had been in the Army. Those that hadn't, that's like, the other experiences. Shatner played football in college and high school, so he knew when he'd pissed off the coach, it's time to get an ass ripping. That's another thing. Actors these days are so damn pampered, and the producers and writers, they have no freaking life experience. All they know is television. Something Robin Atler's to point out. Look, when everyone else is younger, it's like, that's kind of like, the Shatner sketch from SNL. I wouldn't watch it. Without living life. It's like, what the. That's the thing, and these guys in the younger days, it's like most of the producers were veterans of World War II or Korea. And some of the cast, Jimmy Doohan was you do a movie just on his experiences on D-Day. They probably should. The Canadians, the Canadian forces on D-Day don't get nearly enough, coverage of what they went through. And Jimmy could be considered a bona fide hero. He took out, I think he took out like 8 German soldiers. And winds up getting shot by one of his own guys. If they hadn't come across some, panicky, trouble, trigger happy Canadian thing, he'd have come through. He'd come through D-Day unscathed. But D. Kelly, not anymore. We're both in the Army. Bob Justman was in the Navy. Gene Kuhn was in both the Marines and the Air Force. I think he was in the Air Force in World War II and Marines in Korea. I know he was a Marine at some point. And of course, Matt Jeffries, I think, was a flight engineer on B-17, and Roddenberry, of course, was pilot. Like I said, when they first met, they spent like the first half hour just sort of reliving World War II because Roddenberry's telling stories of the Pacific and Matt's telling stories from over Europe. Well, it's also kind of, and not to start, but a lot of shows back then really didn't have military advisors because everyone had been in the military. So they knew what was what, what things you get away with and what things no. They wouldn't fly. It's kind of like they would never even consider half the shit that going on. That they try on Strange New Worlds. Like, this is not how a military vessel operates. I mean, I saw a clip on the latest trailer they got for Strange New Worlds. Like, okay, well, it's not I don't think the captain should be addressing everybody by their first names in the situation. Well, it's kind of like, there's a reason why, for decades it was. Uhura, is that her first name or her last name? And same thing with Sulu. It's like, what, I think the only reason I knew Chekhov's first name was Pavel is because he brought it up one time. I wonder. Oh, somebody shot Velma. That's not nice. All right. I think we're fine. I need to check, but I don't know anything about his first name being brought up. Was in the Apple, and he's hanging out with the Yeoman Marta, I think, in Langdon, and she calls him Pop. You know. Otherwise, we don't get a definitive full name on him until Way to Eden, and he's met up with his old girlfriend, Papa Danjevich.
Wrong move. Game over. Let's get back. Somebody knows for the trailer, the picture spread. We don't need to just have it twirling on the view screen. We don't need the entire camera spinning to know the ship is doing a barrel roll. Oh. Perfect. I kind of like the.
Because for one chapter, at least you don't have to worry about ammo. Okay, so we're not quite leveled up yet. I got to do 2 lives here. So, and again, I don't give a shit about this stuff now. Moving on to here. Yeah, probably get there. And then we got one loading screen at the end there. Rest of it, I don't give a shit. What request was? Okay, let's see if we can actually get in the game. In a position to be able to actually choose where I land. Where are we at? 4 people on X. Again, I encourage you to check out the YouTube link so you can check out some of the many links I have in the description on how to support this channel. Have this channel and get this channel to the point where it pays out enough to to help with the rent, but not enough to actually have to report it as regular income. Because otherwise, this is and again, also you're on the YouTube side. There's always the option of super chats. That's always fun. It doesn't pay off immediately, but it helps the build up towards another check from YouTube, and also links to my PayPal account and Patreon and things. And there's also the buy me a coffee thing. Here a lot of people pushing that now. And then as somebody got a subscribe star, get one good push on there so I can get a payout on that one. I just do shut that one down, but it's like 26 cents away from a $75 payout. Actually, no, we'll do the town. Come on. Whoops. Yeah, you got to watch going off that roof. You get a little too eager. It's a long way down to the bottom. Darn it. What the hell's going on here? Just because I don't feel like leave it laying around with the shoes on me. Oh, that was a little too close. Downstairs. Hold on. Okay, tell you what. Get that. That. Okay, I think. After that exchange, I think we have dealt with the question of the opening round glitches. Okay. Droid's trying to work a lawnmower. Okay. Damn it. That's it. When the computer's not trying to kill me, I can manage. Oh, fuck.
Go ahead. Run. Wrong move. Game over.
Says who? Bit of a steep drop. Oh. Age of blink. Yeah. No, come on. Okay. Well, yeah, they're gonna be stuck with one. Might as well make it a better one. Okay. Anything around me to grab? Hope I do. Hate when it does this. Might as well. I haven't seen anything about any pods dropping. I mean, even if one drop you can't even get to, notified. So, I wonder if they vaulted them too. Okay. Yeah. No real hiding in that one. And I'm pretty sure I leveled up. So, yeah. Let's see. No, that's not showing up. There we go. All right, finally, it's this before. Half the time it's like you already got the pass. Then it's like, oh, you got one available. No, I did have one available. I just used it. Okay. Alrighty, and we're just gonna go with that. And gliders are always fun. You know. Gliders you can mix and match around. So let's see, where are we on quests? There's the one I can just knock off easy. Just hit them. That's all right. We're getting. Either hit 10 different people or hit one guy 10 times. That's what I don't know if we're going to level up again here, but let's just go ahead and knock it out here. If anybody waiting for another rant on indie, I'm not going to be specific, but I will point out that new surveys out, and kids identifying as trans, the rate is dropping like a rock. Which means it's a fad, pretty much like every other one. The only difference is most fads don't include lifelong sterilization and mangling of the body. Yeah. It's like those of the 70s, yes, we all had to wear bell bottoms, because there were no straight leg pants in the store. You had no choice. But when that one was over, I still had my nuts and they were functional. Okay. I can still wear my hair in there practically a Beatles style. It's like I'm still fertile, At least capable of impregnating a female, The folks who bought a pet rock, but probably didn't need to go through counseling as a result of buying a pet rock. Now, maybe they should have gone through counseling to figure out why they bought pet rock in the first place, but that's a separate issue. Bug's getting ballsy. said, I'll just put it with like Andy. You hitched your wagon to a dying trend. We pushed into this year's version of emo. Okay. Goth type thing. The only difference is couldn't just be just a goth like right now. I had to go for the one that involves sterilization. And actually, one thing I'm feeling concerned about is what? Can you wait until I'm done here? I'm streaming. I'm getting my stream in. I haven't got much longer than this. I'm probably going to wrap up after this one. There's one thing I'm concerned about. She's complaining about nausea and stuff. It's like, well, it's a dirty little secret into your hormone treatments. Again, it's not a trans thing. It's because your hormones are thoroughly fucked up. That's why you're still having your periods while on birth control, ostensibly. So you might want to invest in some home pregnancy test gear. You might have to have some very hard decisions coming up. The thing is, your state of mind, I'm not sure how to advise you on this one. If you were local, I'd have a better position to offer support, but you were the hell in Seattle, and the relative insanity you're already your prior statements about not wanting to birth no babies. Might want to contend with just how loud that biological clock is ticking. It's one thing to declare, in a hypothetical. You don't want to, you would, rip it out. Another thing when you're actually staring down the thing of this is your child. And at the age of 30, you're at a point where any pregnancy at this point is considered an elderly one. I want to keep that. So you might not be getting a whole lot of choices at getting a kid. And again, I'm not really sure how to argue for it or whatever. It's frankly debatable if you are in a position to be able to raise a child. Whether or not your fiance at the moment is someone you want to raise a child with, if he wants to raise a child. Especially since, it's going to be the whole 9 yards of from scratch, as in diaper changes, and potty training and all that. You won't be able to go to, some adoption agency. Not that, you think seriously with your record, it's definitely not a guarantee they would even approve you for an adoption. Whereas you can grow your own. God knows, one of my things I would describe my job as a school bus driver is as a chauffeur for other people's failed attempts at parenting. Oh, come on. There we go. All right, now let's see. Let's get these arranged properly here, and then there, and then that there. What? I'll be done when I'm done, and the mail's not going anywhere, so what's your damn hurry? And again, I'll wait your damn turn, okay? Hold on. I gotta wonder, they blow the place apart and then, get in the top. Not a little bit. Well, not a pod, but there's a throwback, but all right. Okay. All right.
Back for another sequel.
Okay. there's a pod.
What's your favorite scary game?
Really use some shields about now. What? Hold on. I'm very close to winning this thing. Hold on. Well, maybe not. Hold on. Oh well. Back in a second here. Oh. Hold on how much longer. Okay. We're up. Yeah, this skin is basically pay to win. Okay. Oh, so close. Okay, let's go back to the lobby. I think I might do one more to this just because we're that close to leveling up. But first, I'm going to throw up another video. A short one this time. I don't want to not to check the mailbox. Okay, there we go. The hell just happened? Okay. Let's see. I think. What was that one? 13 minutes. This one is 17. That's 11. Okay. It's only 15? Well, it's 15 minutes. I'll be back in 15 minutes or so. Put that one up there.
A fan film is exactly what the name implies, a film made by fans of a particular subject. And in the case of Star Trek, these amateur productions have been around almost as long as Star Trek itself. The earliest publicly available example dates back to 1967, while Star Trek was still running on NBC. Titled simply Star Trek, it's about what you'd expect of the genre at the time, kids utilizing the family Super 8 camera, makeshift uniforms with hand-drawn insignias, use of the model they got for Christmas, etc. The first noteworthy attempt to kick things up a notch came in 1974 with now partially lost John Constantino's Paragon's Paragon, essentially an adaptation of James Blish's Star Trek novel Spock Must Die. The film ran for an hour, shot on 16mm film, features a full-size recreation of the bridge set, more or less, and presented an ambitious variety of special effects on a budget of around $2,000, roughly $10,000 in today's dollars. Something to keep in mind is that through much of the history of fan films, Paramount gladly turned a blind eye to such activities. Not only fan films, but bootleg ship models, costumes, and fanzines, so long as they didn't make any actual appreciable amount of money off of their intellectual property. I.e., not enough that it was worth it for Paramount to unleash their lawyers and shut it all down. The next major attempt at a semi-pro level fan film came in 1985 with Yorktown, A Time to Heal, with the key selling points being the inclusion of George Takei as Sulu and James Shigeta as Admiral Nogura, the admiral who gave Kirk back command of the Enterprise in Star Trek the Motion Picture. This project even got a write-up in Starlog magazine at the time. Unfortunately, production was abandoned before completion and lay dormant for nearly 20 years when work resumed in 2010. In April 2022, the longest gap in production history ended, and Yorktown: A Time to Heal finally hit YouTube to mostly positive response. December of 2002 saw the debut of Starship Exeter, featuring the adventures of a decontaminated and recrewed USS Exeter, last seen in the infamous original series episode The Omega Glory, with her crew reduced to white crystals. Under the command of Captain John Quincy Garrivick, cousin to Ensign Garrivick on the Enterprise and nephew of the late Captain Garrivick of the Farragut, both referenced in the original series episode Obsession, we meet a fairly diverse and interesting group of characters, and the first fan film production to present us with accurate recreations of the original sets. Uniforms and hand props are one thing, but building full-size sets is a whole nother level of commitment. Even most productions nowadays tend to go for the cheaper option of green screens and CGI recreations. The debut episode, The Savage Empire, showed great promise, claymation monster notwithstanding, and a fan following started to take shape. Unfortunately, the second episode, The Tresarian Intersection, ran into the common enemy of most fan films, specifically real life. Being released one act at a time, with acts 1 through 3 coming out fairly quickly, the delay in the release of Act 4, due to the demanding visuals and folks having to eat and pay their own bills, stretched out a few years. In all, from the start of principal photography to the release of the final act, it took nearly 10 years for the completed episode to finally see the light of day. Needless to say, the third episode, The Atlantis Invaders, never happened. By the way, that bridge set, after a stop in Oklahoma for much-needed refurbishment and restoration, now lives in Arkansas with a group of Starship Ajax, another aspiring fan film group. This series took the approach many fan films take, depicting other ships and officers in the Star Trek universe, away from the Enterprise, allowing the writers and actors to follow their own paths and not run afoul of the established canon. After all, it'd take some serious balls to actually take on the roles of Kirk, Spock, and the rest, right? Well, in 2004, James Cawley decided to grab onto that third rail of fan films and produce Star Trek New Voyages, with Cawley himself taking on the role of Captain Kirk. A former underling of Star Trek costume designer William Ware Tice, Cawley has made most of his money primarily as one of the world's most acclaimed Elvis impersonators, hence the jet black pompadour. I like to think of this as an alternate timeline where Hawaii Five-0 didn't take off, Jack Lord had a slight change of heart regarding Star Trek, Shatner left after the third season, and Kirk is recast Darren Stevens style, with Jack Lord donning the command tunic for considerably less than the 50% ownership he asked for the first time he was asked back in 1964. As is the standard with any such production where cast and crew largely consist of highly enthusiastic amateurs, the first offerings are a little rough, with slightly dodgy camera work, rough audio mixes, and frankly flat amateurish lighting. Thankfully, these issues were quickly resolved with subsequent episodes, although the second episode, In Harm's Way, became a touchstone for how not to depict the Enterprise. Whenever you hear complaints about the Enterprise being zipped around like a colonial viper, this is where that happened. In 2008, the production changed its name to Star Trek Phase 2, a clear nod to the planned Star Trek revival TV series that was shelved in favor of Star Trek the Motion Picture, itself an adaptation of what would have been the pilot episode for Phase 2. This wasn't just a clever rebranding, however. The intent was to produce some of those unproduced Phase 2 scripts. This only got as far as The Child, a script that had already been adapted for the Next Generation's second season to get around to writer's strike at the time, and Katoomba, a John Meredith Lucas story about the Klingons that required some serious reworking to bring it in line with Klingon society as we knew it by the time of Enterprise, and featuring future Captain Kirk Vic Mignogna as a villainous Klingon. It was while developing a Norman Spinrad script, He Walked Among Us, a script initially pitched for the original series as a vehicle from Milton Berle, believe it or not, that the friendly folks at CBS chimed in to remind Cawley that they still own those scripts and would really prefer that nobody else produced them. This was around the time of the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies, and CBS, or at least Bad Robot, developed a serious case of territoriality, putting the kibosh on that idea. Remember, this was the same period when Bad Robot tried to tell CBS to stop merchandising anything connected to the original series, prompting CBS to instruct J.J. Abrams to do something anatomically impossible to himself. This also marked an end to Cawley's turn as Captain Kirk, citing both scheduling issues and weariness of the blowback from Star Trek fans who weren't very charitable to his portrayal of Captain Kirk, prompting him to pull back a bit to focus on producing the show, and bringing in actor Brian Gross to take over the role of Kirk for the last of the production's 10 episodes. Cawley's last official on-screen appearance in the series was as a demented mental patient who thought he was Elvis, in the adaptation of Shirley Mioski's much-beloved fanfic Mind Sifter. Although there is his turn as Kirk in the unfinished episode Origins, an adaptation of David Gerrold's original series pitch The Protracted Man, which also gave us a look at things to come with return appearance of Vic Mignogna, this time as Jim Kirk's father, Commander George Kirk. Although Starship Exeter initially kicked off the current state of fan films with faithful recreations of sets and higher quality visual effects, most folks looked at New Voyages as when Star Trek fan films kicked into high gear, partially because Cawley did grab that third rail of taking on the role of Kirk, garnering a lot of attention both pro and con, and the fact that this production had the active participation of actual Star Trek veterans both in front of and behind the camera, most notably George Takei, Grace Lee Whitney, and Walter Koenig, reprising their old roles of Sulu, Rand, and Chekhov, even giving William Wyndham a chance to give Commodore Decker a happy ending, but scripts from D.C. Fontana, Mark Zicree, and David Gerrold, who finally got to produce a version of his rejected next-gen AIDS allegory script, Blood and Fire. Gerrold would later take over showrunner duties on Phase 2 until they shut down in 2016. More on that later. It was during this period that more fan groups were inspired by New Voyages and Exeter to build their own sets or arrange to borrow sets from other groups, and the Star Trek fan films entered something of a golden age. Which brings us to the high watermark of this cultural and creative process, Star Trek Continues. Produced by Vic Mignogna, who, besides showing up in the occasional fan film, is a noted actor in his own right, and is most well known for his work in anime voice acting, along with a cast of primarily experienced professional actors, many of them also associated with anime voice work, and production crew, as opposed to the usual group of enthusiastic amateurs, and their own batch of faithful recreations of the original sets, starting with the bridge and other set pieces acquired from Starship Farragut, another fan film production headquartered in southern Georgia, that, through bad luck, lost the loan of their warehouse that served as their soundstage. From there, more sets were recreated, eventually including a stunning recreation of main engineering. The only other production to have an engineering set was Phase 2, and they never really got to use theirs on camera. Star Trek Continues set itself apart with the stated goal of completing the 5-year mission and setting up the characters for where we find them in Star Trek the Motion Picture. And over the course of 11 full-length episodes, they accomplished that goal. What sets Star Trek Continues apart from other productions are a few key factors. Every episode was made with a concerted effort to match up as closely as possible to the look and feel of the original series, from the signature colored lighting, the camera angles, and in the age of high-def wide original 4:3 screen ratio, with added film grain added to match the look of the original 35mm film stock. The scripts were all consistent with those of the original series, that is not just an excuse to run around in costume and fight the Klingons. In fact, the Klingons don't appear once during the entire run of Star Trek Continues, although the Romulans show up at the end. Rather, the emphasis was on the traditional subtle approach to current social issues, building upon established canon, and of course, giving Vic Mignogna that chance to chew the scenery with true Shatnerian gusto. The vast majority of the cast of any episode are professional actors, with several guest stars well known to genre fans throughout the run, including Aaron Gray, John Delancey, Colin Baker, and others. Then, on June 11, 2014, the fan film community was turned upside down. Famous fan Alec Peters, previously known for his dealing in rare Star Trek collectibles through his company Propworks, released a 20-minute documentary-style short, Prelude to Axanar. Directed by Robert Meyer Burnett with visual effects by Tobias Richter, the intention was to set up the eventual production of a feature-length professional Star Trek story, Star Trek Axanar, which would tell the story of Garth of Izar, last seen in the original series episode Whom Gods Destroy, and his role in the 4 Years' War, an event prior to the original series, and largely rooted more in fan speculation than hard canon, wherein the Klingon Empire and the Federation go to war, and we learn how and why Garth became the legendary starship captain that became the boyhood hero to James Kirk. Many in the cast, with the notable exception of Peters, was a well-known Star Trek or genre veteran. Peters, of course, cast himself as Garth. The visual effects were nothing short of spectacular, and the list of premiums for different levels of contributions was staggering. Donations reached over $2 million, and plans were announced to use the production of Axanar as the basis for an independent, for-profit studio where fans would be able to come and produce their own projects in a professional-level facility. In the eyes of CBS, the current owners of Star Trek, that line where fan creators were not allowed to make any money from their projects was about to be crossed, and the lawyers were dispatched from on high, and the entire fan film community was about to pay the price for Axanar's ambitions. So it was, on December 29, 2015, CBS and Paramount Pictures filed a copyright lawsuit seeking damages in the U.S. District Court for the Central District of California, stating Axanar's works infringed their rights by making use of the Klingon language and innumerable copyrighted elements of Star Trek, including its settings, characters, species, and themes. The sword of Damocles that had hung over fan projects for decades had fallen, and Alec Peters, who likes to describe himself as a lawyer even though he's never practiced law anywhere, seems to revel in the attention and the conflict, while the entire fan film community very nearly ceased to exist in the carnage. In the middle of all this, mainly as a response to one of Peters' defenses that there weren't any guidelines to follow, so he couldn't be found guilty of violating rules that hadn't been laid down in the first place, on June 23, 2016, Paramount and CBS released guidelines for fan films to head off any future mishaps and misunderstandings. The days of the property owners turning a blind eye to fan activities had come to an end. Groups that had projects already in active production were allowed to finish up as planned, allowing, for example, Star Trek Continues to complete their final batch of episodes. Phase 2, on the other hand, decided to just shut down production entirely, turning their soundstage into an officially licensed tourist attraction, giving fans around the world a reason to travel to upstate New York. Star Trek Horizon had just released a feature-length film set during the period of Star Trek Enterprise, ironically on the Starship Discovery, and were planning a sequel when they received a relatively cordial advisory from CBS not to do that, so they just abandoned the project. Everyone else pretty much sat back and started rethinking their projects. The outcome came on January 20th, 2017, when all parties agreed to a settlement wherein Alec Peters and Axanar Productions promised to make substantial changes to Axanar and agreeing to abide by the newly minted guidelines for fan films, meaning that instead of the planned 90-minute feature, Axanar could be no longer than 30 minutes in two 15-minute segments with no ads allowed. So on March 31st, 2024, after $2 million in contributions, over 9 years of delays, numerous lawsuits filed by Peters against former production associates and critics, copyright claims to material he doesn't really own in the first place, and while still owing CBS over $300,000 plus interest over the lawsuit settlement, their much-heralded short film, The Icarus Maneuver, was released, utilizing an extensive visual sequence directed and designed by Rob Burnett and Tobias Richter way back in 2015, a sequence Peter claimed he never got and had been stolen by Burnett, and the video was promptly taken down on orders from CBS for violation of the settlement agreement. What we'll get next from the Axanar side of the fan film quadrant is difficult to say, but it appears CBS is about to have the final say. Elsewhere in the fan film community, things guidelines and learn where they can stretch them a bit and where they need to back off. Neutral Zone Studios, home of the Star Trek Continues sets in Kingland, Georgia, provides a production home for several fan film producers, as well as hosting periodic open houses for interested fans from all over the world. Samuel Calkins, through his Power 543 Fan Films production outfit, has produced dozens of fan films for a fraction of the budget as Axanar's handful of shorts, with visual effects easily on the same level as anything produced in the professional Star Trek productions. With nearly everyone having a high-definition camera on their phone and video editing and CGI software available for every income, many of the obstacles in producing high-quality fan film productions have been removed, bringing everyone down to one basic starting point. Do you have a story worth telling? And do you know how to tell it? Everything else is just details. So, what's your story?
Okay, get back in here. Another one. We're good doing an update on that one. Robot Shlomo is doing me a narration to update that because one, better, he's a better narrator than I am. I do what I can. But also, the Star Trek Continues sets are now currently in Sandusky, Ohio, being reassembled at the Sandusky Mall. They should be ready by next month. And if you're in the Sandusky area or can get there, they can use any help you can provide. So if you have any carpentry or construction skills, give them a call. They'll put you to work. So let's go ahead and do one more round here. So let's see. Yeah, still gotta do one daily quest. I call that a day. But yeah, they said that ghost face thing is practically pay to win. Yeah. Now I don't think the one you buy in the shop will not have that kind of kick-ass thing. Let's see where it is. Yeah, this you will not be able to rampage like you do when go to the thing in the. Hey, well, let's go ahead. Whoop. Yeah, let's not do that. Okay. And we'll see what that does to the price of the bundle later. For that kind of thing, I can use that on different skins too. Now I want to get a package of stuff with one new, travel mug, steal one. But the box, the parcel box, and the thing I put it on, I damn near almost broke the key off trying to get it open. That was a bit, hairy. I got it open and nothing broke, but that key is definitely bent. I had to have some serious torque on that thing to even get it to start to turn. Okay. Come on. Don't be locking up on me. Let's get up in the mountains for a while. We'll go for those mountains. Okay. Shall oh shit. Give me that. Before somebody gets hurt. All right. There we go. That's my level up. All right, let's just go with it. Let's get back up here. Okay, let's go here. And up to the cave. Mm-hmm. This is always fun. Okay, let's a better shotgun. Right. Right. Okay, let's just leave me one short. Oh. Okay. You want to go down there? Oh, why not? Hmm. Hmm. Actually, let's get back up top. So I already got it. Oh well. Yeah, that took care of that one. Whoa, shit. What the hell? Hmm. Alrighty. Let's go back to the lobby. Alrighty. Oh yeah, another Fortnite goodies. And that, like a couple more goodies off it. Well, yeah. So moving on down the line here. Whoops. And that. Okay, and with that, I think I'm gonna go ahead and call it for the night. Oh, now she gets it. Well, she's doing Lego anyway, so. Okay. But yeah, Indy, if you were getting suddenly nauseous and whatever, it's like you better get a pregnancy check here, because don't assume because suddenly you know period because your pills are working. No, you're getting periods on your pill, which means you're as fertile as an Iowa cornfield. So you might want to check. And again, if it comes back positive, I don't know what to tell you. As pro-life as I am, but I really couldn't, advise you on this one. I think it's just really your call. And I don't know what your parents would have to say about it. If they would think of the fact you're talking about killing our grandchild, Anyway, on that note, I think we'll just call it there. So we'll talk at you later.